Running a Fever, Episode 404, The Jeanne Calment Story. Welcome to Running a Fever. This is a show about fitness, diet, and medicine. The goal is to live a long, healthy, happy, active life right up to the very end. To love my life enough to make it last as long as possible. I'm Michael Davis. The world is fascinated with long life, perhaps because we wonder what we would do individually if we had an abundance of time, the world's most valuable resource. It's fun to think about it. And so the world is fascinated by Jeanne Calment, the human with the longest documented lifespan, 122 years, 164 days. In episode 170, I gave an overview of her life and some details about her healthy and unhealthy habits in a 30-minute show. Now I will provide a broader review of her life with more detail. As was his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, Nicolas Calment was a boat builder by trade, born in 1837. His wife, Marguerite, gave birth first to a son, Francois, in 1865, and 10 years later, at about 7 a.m. on Sunday, February 21, 1875, to a daughter named Jeanne-Louise. Her godfather was a diplomat named Louise Page, and her godmother was her aunt, Jeanne Gilles. The place was the city of Arles, in the Provence region of southern France, where Jeanne was to live the rest of her long life. She had two other siblings, Antoine and Marie, who both died young. Though she didn't see her godfather much, Jeanne's godmother was nice and spoiled her with lots of sweets and cakes. She didn't care much for pastry, but she loved ice cream, especially vanilla. She also liked quatre-quarts, which is similar to pound cake. Even in her 117th year, Jeanne had sweets at every meal. She never gained weight, though, throughout her life. She said she had the stomach of an ostrich. Sometimes she would have as much as 2 pounds of chocolate in a week, and she enjoyed a glass of port wine as well. Jeanne's father called her a tomboy, and her brother Francois was a gentle one. Francois was a sailor. She began her education at a girls-only church school called Madame Benet's boarding school at the age of 7. She had her first communion while she was attending. After first communion, she went on to what she called college. At school, she would go home at noon, picked up by her father or their maid, returning in the afternoon again, picked up by her father. He was very protective of her. She went to school until she was 16, passing her brevet, the exam needed to enter the lycée, or high school. But she did not go on to high school. After age 16, she stayed with her parents, as she said, awaiting marriage. She did a lot of painting during this time in her life, making large paintings. Her brother Francois painted as well. She also painted a screen and made stained glass windows with flowers. Vincent van Gogh came to Arles on February 20, 1888, when Jeanne was 13. It is possible that she met him. She said in some newspaper interviews that her husband had introduced her. She wasn't married at the time, but had already met her future husband. It was during this visit to Arles that Van Gogh cut his ear and was hospitalized there. Later in life, she appeared in a film about him, a French-Canadian production called Vincent and Me. Music was an ongoing part of Jeanne's life, starting at the age of 7 with piano lessons. It was common for little girls of bourgeois education to take up piano. She never forgot how to play and did so well into old age. Her first piano teacher was César Gaston. As a young girl, Jeanne's father forbade her from going to the opera, but she went quite often after she got married. She didn't care for the operas in Arles, so they would go to Marseille. The first opera she ever saw was Tannhauser. She didn't really have a favorite, but she liked Mozart, both at the opera and when she played piano. When they went to the opera, Jeanne would wear beautiful evening dresses and furs, one of which was a silver fox. When Jeanne was 10 years old, Nicolas Calment built his last ship and called it La Jeanne for his daughter. It was a large type of barge made of wood. The launching was a big event in Arles. There was a party and the whole town came. The mayor was there, along with the sous-prefect, a representative of the French government. A priest was also there to bless the vessel. It was a Sunday. Jeanne wore a beautiful white dress with a big blue sash around the middle, tied in a bow at the back. Nicolas christened the boat with a bottle of champagne. As the barge was being launched, a band played La Marseillaise, the French national anthem. After he closed his shipbuilding business, Nicolas became a municipal advisor in Arles. She remembers celebrations in Arles that included bullfights, but she did not like them. She thought they were savage. Her husband liked them, though. She once saw a famous toreador known as Espartero. She watched him die in a bullfight in Nîmes. The bull tore off his coat, then jumped on top of them. Jeanne had known Fernand Nicolas Calment her whole life. He lived in Avignon, and every year she went there on a holiday. He would always visit her when he came to Arles. She recalls that he was good-looking and nice and had a pleasant, patient nature. Other girls were interested in him. She said, "My husband was a marvelous man. When one has an angel, one keeps him, and the rest don't see you." When she was 15, he tried to court her, but she was still a kid, more interested in candy than boys. Jeanne's father was strict and would not let her go to dances or anywhere else on her own. On April 8, 1896, Jeanne and Fernand got married. So she didn't change her last name. Her godmother gave her a headdress for her wedding, a wreath of white lilac. They moved into an apartment above their fabric shop, where she would live until she entered a nursing home at the age of 110. As a married couple, they would play tennis, roller skate, cycle, swim, fence, and take excursions to the mountains. They liked taking long hikes. They even ice skated on the nearby Rhone River. But mostly they would hunt. Jeanne says she had a masculine nature. Fernand taught Jeanne to hunt, and they formed a group of hunters known as a stockholder society that would hunt together. They hunted rabbits. They had a hunting dog named Liberty, who lived in their apartment with them. Fernand inherited his father's successful fabric shop, Jeanne Calment et Fils, which sold drapery, lingerie, silks, and more. They moved into the apartment above the shop. There were about 10 employees. Jeanne never worked in the shop. In fact, she never had a job. Though it is common for centenarians to cite work as one of the keys to their long life, Jeanne had no experience with it at all. Jeanne and Fernand liked to go to Marseille, where they would eat at a restaurant, Faucine. Jeanne in particular liked the seafood, oysters and mussels, or bouillabaisse with a glass of white wine. Bouillabaisse is a traditional Provençal fish soup. After Jeanne got married, she would smoke one cigarette or cigarillo after dinner. It was not unusual for married women to smoke, but young girls were not allowed to. She preferred Dunhill cigarettes and continued this practice until she was 117. After Jeanne and Fernand got married, Fernand, whose name literally means brave traveler, wanted to travel before they had children. In 1897, after they had been married for 1 year, their daughter Yvonne was born. The birth went well, assisted by a midwife named Madame Lelière. Yvonne took after her father and was sweet and easy to raise, as Jeanne remembered it. At her first communion, she wore a white dress, and Jeanne wore a pink dress and a hat. She did well in school, Madame Benet's private boarding school, and passed her brevet. Jeanne and Yvonne would play duets on the piano together. The turn of the 20th century happened when Madame Calment was 25 years old. Her husband was 46 when World War I started and did not serve. They traveled a lot after the war. The worldwide economic crisis that started in 1929 did not affect the Calments at all. Their business continued to thrive. They seemed to be living a charmed life. Yvonne married Colonel Joseph Bilot, a career soldier, at Saint-Trophime, dressed in white satin and a lilac stem headdress, paid for by Madame Elrel. In 1926, they had a son, Frederick Bilot. Then, in January of 1934, Yvonne, now 36, died of pleurisy, which is an inflammation of the membranes that surround the lungs and line the chest cavity. She was hospitalized at first, then returned home during Advent of 1933, where she died. This was, of course, a very sad memory for Jeanne, and one she did not like to talk about. After Yvonne's death, Jeanne raised her grandson Frederick as her own, though he lived with his father in a nearby apartment. She remembered him as good-natured, and she loved him very much. He called her Manzane, which is a contraction of Maman Jeanne. Frederick went to medical school and became a doctor, an ear, nose, and throat specialist, ENT. He later opened a practice in their home. In 1942, Fernand died of copper sulfate poisoning. They had been staying with friends in the country, where they both had eaten cherries that had been treated with copper sulfate. Jeanne had not eaten as much as her husband and was able to survive. But Fernand died several months later. He was 74. She was 67. In 1944, she finally got the right to vote. She was 69 years old. Frederick died in a car accident in 1962. She would go to the cemetery on foot or bicycle to meditate at his grave. She continued this even after she moved into the Maison du Lac at the age of 110, though she then went by taxi. Jeanne knew Nobel Prize winner Frédéric Mistral, who won the 1904 Nobel Prize in Literature. He was a friend of her husband's. Mistral lived and wrote about the region in which Jeanne Calment lived. Did she celebrate when she reached 100 years old? No, she said. That one wasn't extraordinary. It was discreet. It wasn't that unusual. I was doing well. My health has helped me a lot. It still does. My health was good, and I had a hell of a lot of willpower. On February 14, 1991, Jeanne Calment became the oldest person in the world when Carrie White died in Florida at the age of 116 years 4 months. Jeanne was 1 week short of her 116th birthday. At that time, there were less than 4,000 people in the world over the age of 100. Now, there are over 700,000. When she was 118, when asked if she would be happy to reach 120, she replied, "Well, of course, because I will have the time to make the most of loads of things to come, loads of interesting things." Her 120th birthday party turned her nursing home, Maison du Lac, into a madhouse. The grounds were crammed with hundreds of journalists from TV stations around the world with their trucks and cables, bands, folk groups, and children dressed in Arlesian costumes. VIPs made speeches. The French Minister of Health made an appearance. She had a cake with 120 candles. A parade of postal workers brought in over 16,000 birthday cards from over 100 countries around the world. Madame Calment was always religious. In her younger days, she would always go to Mass, and on Fridays she went to Vespers. She would also go to church on the first Friday of every month. And even near the end of her life, she always said a prayer in the morning. One prayer she said was, "My God, Lord, I need you more than ever to help me do certain things." She said the Lord's Prayer and the Hail Mary in the morning and in the evening. And she said that she did not want to die, but said if death comes, it won't bother me. Jeanne Calment died of unknown cause in the early morning of Monday, the 4th of August, 1997. She was buried quietly the next day. She is to date the only dodecacentenarian to ever live. There is no such thing as a terrible ordeal. You just have to find a solution each time. Well, thank you for listening to Running Fever. Remember, if you've got the fever, keep it burning. And if you don't have the fever, then go out and catch it. And I will talk to you next time on Running Fever.